latter months of 1965, a collection of countries within the European Economic Community, including the already spacefaring nations of the United Kingdom with the CWSC and France with KNES, began collaborating on a project to push their individual nations to new heights none could hope to achieve alone. By combining intellectual and economical wealth between these nation-states, space, what once used to be a playground of the superpowers of the Soviet Union and the United States, has opened. In the summer of 1966, the testing facility in French Guiana, known for the Kerbalkind launches, finishes a massive renovation, one that puts the site on the map and capable of producing the new flagship vessel of the newly formed agency, the Ariane 1. Going into the latter half of 1966, the Kourou launch facility is ready to see its first mission and the dawn of a new era of spaceflight in what will come to be known as the era of international collaboration.
Hello everyone, Karnasa here and welcome back to For All Kerbalkind, and you are seeing in front of you what we will be seeing a lot more of in the future. That's right, it is Kourou, the European Space Agency's launch site. I have now built it up and it is ready to fly missions. But first, we are going to be coming back to Woomera because I do have a Black Duke launch vehicle that I am going to be attempting to use, although that goes rather badly, in that I forgot to change the fuel mixture in it. So you may know that we have now updated our For All Kerbalkind save to 1.12.3, and there have been a lot of finicky bugs to get over. One thing that I forgot to do for this launch was to actually change the propellant, because in older versions of RP-1 was kerosene. There is now a liquid fuel called RP-1, which I neglected to change for Chips 1. But that was just a quick recover to the vehicle assembly building where I changed the correct fuels. I also did need to, unfortunately, rebuy every single engine and retool the entire thing. That was a little costly and I didn't refund myself for that. But anyway, on to the mission at hand. Chips 1 launched on the 18th of August 1966, and this is going to be my first ever navigational satellite. And CHIPS is an acronym, and I didn't come up with this, ChatGPT did, but I knew I wanted to launch a satellite called CHIPS, because there is going to be a reason for that, which I will reveal somewhat later. But this is going to be the Celestial High Precision International Positioning System. You can see why I made that into an acronym. That is quite a bit of a mouthful. This is being launched on top of a Black Duke launch vehicle, as is pretty much all of my launches at the moment. It is a very capable launch vehicle and it only fits on the 60-ton pad. I can build these incredibly quickly, and that is definitely something that I'm going to be wanting to do, to flood all of low Earth orbit with chips. Yes, I am going to be sending so many chips to space because I want a navigational network, and then I'm also going to be setting up a communications network later on as well. And would you guess what those are going to be called? They are going to be my fish satellites. So yes, the British are going to be swarming space with fish and chips. Yes, I really could not help myself from throwing in a completely awful pun for the British satellites in this series. I mean, I'm playing as the UK. We definitely want to launch as much fish and chips to low Earth orbit as possible. But that aside, this is now a little bit of a problem. I mentioned that I needed to change the fuels earlier on. I didn't update my RCS fuel, and because this is a navigational satellite, I planned on having a little bit of a coast phase for this rocket, which meant that I had no way to ullage this spacecraft, although I did have a couple of very small RCS thrusters on the top, which I think were firing, and I think that's why the engine was sufficiently ullaged for me to light it again, as I did. But I'm not sure if that's the case, or if it's just the way that the spacecraft was oriented, it was pointing down towards Earth. Maybe gravity was pulling on it, although, you know, that's not really how spaceflight works. I'm pretty sure it was the RCS motors on there. But I do get the orbit that is required for the navigational satellite, which is over 300 kilometers, and Chips 1 is a complete success, even though there were a few issues along the way. Coming back to the Space Center, I need money, so I come in and pick up a Lunar Impactor contract because that gets me a lot. I also have a bit of science, so I come in and buy 1962 to 63 solid rocket engines. I have no tech in there that I can use, but I thought I might as well progress a little bit further along that tech tree. Then, it is time to scrap the Pyramus V lander, because this is being moved all the way over to Kourou, where it is going to be attached on top of a different rocket. And this is mainly why this episode is called International Collaboration. Because I did not dock myself funds from scrapping that vessel, I decided not to give myself funding back for rebuying engines earlier on, which may have been a mistake, as I went and bought the RZ20 engine, which is going to be my Hydrolox engine. That sent me back 135,000 funds. It was quite costly. Now we're warping ahead to the 30th of September, where I am simulating rolling out a rocket. A rocket that magically has appeared at the Kourou launch site, and this is a collaboration with N9. After some very serious diplomatic talks over Discord, me and the Astral Foundation came to an agreement. They would send me one of their Titan 3 Kentaur rockets so that I can send Pyramus V to space. And Pyramus V is going to be my first attempt at soft landing on the moon. I do personally have a launch vehicle capable of lifting something like this myself in the Ariane 1, but when the Americans come to you and offer you a launch vehicle for free in the names of international cooperation, well, I couldn't really turn down that offer. That was the best trade deal of all time. But in the future, maybe once Kourou is a little bit more proficient and can launch quite a bit more than it currently can, we may offer out a hand of friendship back to the Astral Foundation and say that they can use our launch facilities if they so should choose to potentially have a base of operations to launch some very easy geostationary satellites. Obviously, being equatorial, Kourou is going to be fantastic for that. And this offer does not just go out to the Astral Foundation. I do also want to carry on working with the Soviets too. I have already done a collaborative mission with them when I sent Jeffrey Decouplers up to space on a Soyuz, but now we are approaching the end of the Titan's launch to space. The Kentaur stage cuts out and puts me in a very nice orbit to send this probe to the moon. Well, the Titan 3 performs flawlessly, which is really nice. N9 was actually a little worried that there would be problems with test-light configs, considering those will not carry over to my save. And because I have launched this, not N9, I am running on the base 0% test-light data. But it all worked perfectly. Now all that it's got to do is somehow get to the moon, and we're going to use the Kentaur stage for that again. My plans for doing this with the Ariane would have been the same. My upper stage for the Ariane is actually going to be slightly different from in real life. In real life, it used the HM7. I have gone for the RZ20 purely because it has relights. That's the only reason why I've gone for the RZ20 over the HM7. The HM7 is actually much more efficient. Anyway, the Kentaur stage fires up both of its RL10 engines. It feels a little bit weird saying the RL10 whilst I'm playing as the UK ESA, if I'm going to be honest. That's a very American engine, and I'm very thankful to N9 that he has sent me over some of those. The Kentaur stage burns to completion though, and gets me almost a direct impact course with the moon, but not quite, but something that I can easily adjust with a small amount of RCS. The American stage of this mission has now been finished. The Centaur firing up successfully. All that remains now is the British section of the mission. And unfortunately, telemetry data from the probe as it gets closer and closer to the moon is indicating there is much more spin than anticipated. Now, I spin stabilize this at Earth because the stage that fires up and kills most of my velocity is completely unguided. And for some reason, it spun more and more and more the closer to the moon I got. I didn't really spin it up at all when I was at Earth, but this is just what happened, and because of that I did go a little bit off of my retrograde vector when firing up the engine to try and slow this down so that the controllable upper stage is able to slow it down completely. But because I'm not firing directly retro, well, I'm getting a lot of cosine losses here, and it just means that this mission, unfortunately, is going to be doomed to fail. With the Gamma 2 stage completely depleted, Pyramus V is separated, and the tiny little RCS thrusters on top of this cube-shaped lander unfortunately are not enough to kill the speed and get me pointed at my retro direction. I still might have just been able to salvage this if these were a little bit more powerful. Alas, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and the last few moments of this probe's life were spent fighting its direction, trying to get it pointing in a way that meant that I would not crash into the lunar surface. But unfortunately, that was not to be. And Pyramus V just became an incredibly expensive lunar impactor. What's even worse is I don't even finish the lunar impactor contract that I picked up earlier on in this episode because I was not going fast enough when I hit the moon. Still, I did gain a rather large amount of science from that mission, so I have come into research and development where I pick up docking and crew transfer as well as early landing. Next up, Pyramus VI is all built up at Woomera, so I quickly swap over to that space center and roll it out to the pad. Then I go in and start working on Fish 1. And what I am going to do is rush build it so that that gets launched before the Mars Express is ready. Then on the 21st of October, Pyramus VI, once again on top of a Black Duke, is launched to try and impact the moon. And this very well may be the last ever launch of a Black Duke launch vehicle. I did mention earlier on, I have picked up the very nice, the very new, the RZ20 Hydrolox engine. And in the future, all of my Black Duke, Black Prince, and I did even come up with a Black King that I have not showcased yet, they are going to be using the RZ20 engine as the second stage. I'm getting rid of the Black Arrow. It's gone. I don't need to use it anymore. I've got a much more efficient second stage engine, which also happens to have relights. So yes, we will be seeing one of those in a very short time. That's what Fish 1 is going to be launched on. I did learn from my mistakes with the previous Black Duke launch, and I did go and change the RCS fuel in this vehicle because I really do need RCS fuel in order for this to be able to perform its mission. If I cannot control where I am pointing that gamma stage, then there is no way that I'm going to be able to go to the moon. I have an unguided kick stage as my lunar impactor, and that means if I can't control this, well then this mission has failed already. But I did go into the VAB and update my tanks so that they also have helium in them. Our version of For All Kerbalkind was so old that we didn't have the RCS update, and that is one of the reasons why we were so loath to update to the newer versions of RP-1. But yes, if you want even more confirmation on why maybe we shouldn't have updated our save, then go and check out both Beardy's and N9's videos because they both ran into a lot of problems. I think I got off relatively lightly, all things considered. There could have been a lot worse with my install than there was. And that being said, I am personally quite glad that we have updated because there are a lot of really nice new features that modern RP-1 does include that I plan on certainly making use of now that I have them in in this install. Anyway, enough of that aside, we did get to orbit with the Black Duke. Now I am plotting out my maneuver to go to the moon, and because this is a solid stage, I need to make sure that it is exactly 3,150 meters per second of burn to get to the moon. I'm not quite there, I am 0.8 of a meter per second off, but I think that's more than fine for me to fine-tune with the RCS that is on top of the Pyramus impactor. And now it's just a case of spinning up the craft so that once I release the solid stage, which I have just done, it should hopefully point in the right direction and burn all 3,150 meters per second, which it does, but unfortunately I'm still 100 meters per second short of impacting the moon. I don't know how this happened. I have done this flight several times. This should have worked. Back at the Space Center, and the Mars Express is finally ready to be rolled out. 28 days it's going to take. It is a rather large vehicle, and I found myself running out of money, so I picked up an atmospheric analysis satellite contract. This should hopefully be able to be finished, as well as the first communication satellite with Fish 1, which is being launched on the 5th of December 1966, on top of the new Black Duke launch vehicle, so-called Black Duke 2. Because it is the second iteration of this vehicle, the only real change is the second stage. As mentioned before, I have gotten rid of the Black Arrow. Now we are just using a cryogenic upper stage. The RZ-20 will be the engine to power that, which is essentially the British version of the RL-10. It is ever so slightly different and not quite as efficient, but still, it is much more efficient than any engine that I have been using up until this point, which is absolutely fantastic. It's going to mean that my payloads to space are going to greatly increase due to the efficiency gains. When launching this vehicle, I was having to fight around quite considerably with Surface Smart ASS because I needed to make sure my inclination was above 35 degrees, and that meant that I didn't have to launch due east. I did eventually get it above that though, and it doesn't really matter, because even though this is a communication satellite which needs to be put in quite a high orbit, and something that the Black Duke 1 would never have been able to do, thanks to the efficiency gains of this, well, I'm more than capable of doing that even with a bad ascent profile, because yeah, the new engine on this is absolutely fantastic. It gets up to space, and the small fish probe with a lot of solar panels on it is released. The reason why I have so many is because I do have near-Earth avionics on this spacecraft. That means I can always point it to the sun, and I can always gain electric charge, and finally I will have a communication satellite that will last forever. This just so happens to be the first mission in this episode that worked as intended. It's been a very bad episode for me, but I was able to complete both the communication satellite contract as well as the atmospheric analysis satellite contract, which is great, and this will last in space pretty much indefinitely. And that means I am now going to have a satellite where I can bounce signals back off, something that I have been sorely missing. But now that's something I don't have to worry about so much, because I finally launched the hub. The Frequency Integrated Signal Hub, that is, or FISH for short. It's finally here, the European Space Agency's first ever proper mission, the B-GULL Mars Explorer. This isn't even a conventional Ariane 1 because it has 4 boosters on the side to... Hang on, no. I can't do this yet because I am currently running away a little bit from the other 2 in the series. So unfortunately, the first major European Space Agency mission will be happening at the very beginning of my next episode. I really do need the other 2 to catch up, especially as I may be using some Soviet infrastructure for this mission. Well, that is if the Soviets are still planning on putting up a communications network soon. I've gone through the official channels and it's looking good, but who knows, maybe our collaboration with the United States may have soured things for the moment. But anyway, make sure you go check out Beardy's and N9's videos to see their perspective, and I'll see you in the next one. A big thanks to Casey, CDR San, Opus, Redstone Wizard, Shadow Dev, Y Mandarin, Darth Malachor, Mr. Bluestar, Rail Cowgirl, Brian Miller, and the rest of my patrons and members for their continued support. I have been Karnasa, and I will see you later.